I woke up in that hospital bed at 3:17 p.m., and the first thing I saw was the clock. My vision was blurry from the anesthesia, but those red numbers burned into my brain. 3:17 p.m. The exact time my sister Tessa was supposed to walk down the aisle. My phone lit up on the side table, buzzing with notifications. I reached for it with shaking hands, my back screaming in pain from the surgery I'd just survived alone. The screen filled with live videos from the wedding. My parents beaming in the front row. Tessa's white dress catching the sunlight. Laughter and champagne glasses clinking. Music that sounded like it came from another world. A nurse walked in, her eyes soft with pity. "Are you sure no one's coming to sit with you?" she asked gently. I forced a smile even though a tear slipped down my cheek. "They're busy celebrating," I whispered. The nurse squeezed my hand and left quietly. I stared at the empty chair beside my bed, the one that should have held my mother or father or anyone who loved me. Then I whispered to the empty room. They chose her over me. My name is Lauren Keene, and that moment in the hospital changed everything. I'm 29 years old, and I'd spent my entire life being the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who fixed everyone's problems while mine piled up like unpaid bills. But lying there alone, my spine stitched back together by surgeons while my family toasted my sister's perfect day, something inside me hardened like steel. I scrolled through the wedding photos with numb fingers. My parents hugging Tessa like she was made of gold. The bridesmaids laughing. The cake being cut. Then I saw it, the post that made my blood run cold. My mother had written, "Couldn't be prouder of our perfect girl." Not girls. Girl. Singular. I wasn't even mentioned. Not a single text asking how the surgery went. Not one call. Nothing. I locked my phone and stared at the hospital ceiling tiles, counting them one by one. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "Then they can live with her perfection," I said to no one. The words tasted bitter, but they felt true. The memories hit me like waves while I lay there recovering. For years, I'd been the one holding our family together with both hands. I worked 2 jobs, one as a graphic designer at a startup, another doing freelance work on weekends. My parents always said Tessa had so much potential, but potential doesn't pay bills. I did. When Tessa wanted to go to that expensive art school, who covered half her tuition? Me. When my parents' roof started leaking 3 winters ago, who paid for the repairs? Me. When their small catering business needed a new van, who canceled her vacation to Mexico and handed over her savings? Me. I remembered my father patting my shoulder after I gave him that check, saying, "You're strong, Lauren. You'll manage." Manage. That's what I always did. I managed my exhaustion. I managed my back pain that got worse every year. I managed being invisible while Tessa sparkled. 6 months ago, my doctor had looked at my X-rays with a grim expression. "If you don't schedule surgery soon, you could lose mobility in your lower back," he'd said seriously. I'd told my mother about the surgery date immediately. We were sitting in her kitchen, and I'd circled the date on her calendar in red marker. March 15th. "Mom, this is serious," I'd said, my voice shaking slightly. "The doctor said I can't wait any longer." She'd grabbed my hands, her eyes warm. "We'll be there, sweetheart." "Of course we will. Your father and I wouldn't miss it." I'd believed her. Stupid me. 2 weeks later, Tessa had called crying about wedding disasters. The florist had mixed up her order. The venue had double booked. Her world was ending, apparently. I'd watched my parents drop everything and rush to her apartment downtown. Through the phone, I'd heard my father's voice, "Your sister's wedding day comes once in a lifetime, honey. Lauren can reschedule her surgery. She's tough." My hands had frozen on my coffee cup. They were talking about me like I was A dentist appointment, not a major operation. The next day, I'd gotten a call from the hospital. Your mother called and rescheduled your surgery for March 15th, the scheduler said cheerfully. March 15th. Tessa's wedding day. I'd confronted them that same evening, driving to their house with my heart pounding. My mother was arranging flowers in the living room, humming to herself. My father sat reading the newspaper like nothing was wrong. You changed my surgery date without asking me? I'd said, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother had smoothed her dress, not meeting my eyes. We didn't want to stress Tessa out, Lauren. You understand? No. I didn't understand. This surgery is important, I'd said louder. The doctor said, my father had interrupted, folding his newspaper with a sharp snap. You'll be fine. You always are. Your sister needs us right now. This is her moment. I'd looked at both of them, really looked, and saw the truth I'd been avoiding for years. This wasn't neglect. This was a pattern. This was who they were. Who they'd always been. I'd walked to the door slowly, my back aching with every step. Then I'd turned and said quietly, this time, I won't be fine. I'd left before they could respond. So there I was, back in that hospital bed, staring at the rain streaking down the window. The anesthesiologist had come in earlier, clipboard in hand. Emergency contact, he'd asked routinely. I'd hesitated, pen hovering over the form. My parents' names were right there in my mind. But I'd thought about that empty calendar date, about being rescheduled like I didn't matter. I'd written none in the space. The anesthesiologist's eyebrows had risen slightly, but he'd said nothing. My heartbeat had quickened as I signed the consent forms alone, no one there to squeeze my hand or tell me it would be okay. They'd wheeled me into the operating room, and as the anesthesia began pulling me under, I'd heard something faint. Wedding bells. Someone nearby was watching a video on their phone. Even unconscious, I couldn't escape it. When I'd woken up hours later in recovery, the nurse had checked my vitals and smiled kindly. You did great, she'd said. But the chair beside my bed remained empty. No flowers. No cards. Just me and the sound of machines. Beeping. Days crawled by in that hospital room. My body was healing, the doctors said the surgery went perfectly, but something inside me felt permanently broken. I'd scroll through social media during the sleepless nights, watching my family's posts multiply. Pictures of my parents laughing at the reception. Tessa crying with joy as she cut the cake. Videos of the first dance, the toasts, the bouquet toss. Hundreds of comments, beautiful family. So much love. Congratulations. Not one person mentioned me. Not one. It was like I'd been erased from their story completely. On the third day, a physical therapist helped me walk down the hallway. Each step felt like knives in my spine, but I gritted my teeth and kept moving. You're doing great for someone who came here alone, she'd said carefully. I'd nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, I'd stared at my phone for an hour before whispering to the dark room, they've made their choice. Now I'll make mine. The words felt like a promise. Like a vow. I'd been home from the hospital for 2 weeks when my colleague Brandon stopped by with groceries. He'd helped me to the couch, unpacked the bags, and made tea. There's a remote project opening up, he'd said casually. Chicago. The firm is expanding, and they need a lead designer. Better pay, fresh start. I'd stared at my hands, considering. Chicago was 800 miles away. Far from my parents. Far from Tessa. Far from everything that hurt. I don't know, I'd said slowly. My phone had buzzed right then. A text from my mother, when you're feeling better, come help with Tessa's thank you cards. She's overwhelmed. I'd read it 3 times, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Not, how are you feeling? Not, do you need anything? Just another task for reliable Lauren. I'd looked up at Brandon and said, "Actually, can you send me the job details?" Then I'd texted my mother back with steady fingers, "Actually, I'm thinking of leaving." The typing bubbles appeared immediately. My phone had rung within seconds. My mother's voice was sharp. "Don't be dramatic, Lauren." In the background, I'd heard my father, "What's she saying now?" My mother had put me on speaker. "Your sister needs support right now," my father had said, his tone dismissive. The honeymoon was stressful, and she's adjusting to married life. I'd felt my jaw tighten. "You didn't support me when I needed you," I'd said calmly. The line had gone quiet. Then my father's voice came through, cold and final. "You're not the priority right now, Lauren. You never have been." He'd probably meant to say something else, meant to soften it somehow, but those words hung in the air like smoke. My mother had gasped. He didn't mean, but I'd already heard everything I needed to hear. "Yes, he did," I'd said quietly. "And that's fine. I won't be your backup plan anymore." I'd ended the call before they could respond. My hands were shaking, but my decision was made. Chicago. Freedom. A new life where I didn't come second. I'd stood in front of my bathroom mirror that night, really looking at myself for the first time in months. My face was pale from the hospital stay. Dark circles shadowed my eyes. A surgical scar peeked above my shirt collar. But my eyes were clear. Focused. Determined. If I'm not their priority, I'd whispered to my reflection, I'll stop acting like I owe them everything. The woman staring back at me nodded. I'd opened my laptop at the kitchen table and started making lists. Financial moves. Professional contacts. Personal boundaries. Everything I'd been too afraid or too guilty to do before. The joint family account I'd been managing for years, I'd been the only one putting money in. But they all took freely. Time to change that. The business shares in their catering company, I owned 30% from the investment I'd made 5 years ago. Time to sell those too. My apartment lease ended in 60 days. Perfect timing. I'd worked until 2 a.m., planning my exit strategy like a general preparing for war. Silent. Strategic. Unstoppable. Over the next 2 weeks, I'd begun withdrawing my savings from the joint family account. Bit by bit. Nothing dramatic that would trigger alerts, just steady transfers back to my personal account. 5,000 here. 3,000 there. By the time I was done, I'd reclaimed $40,000. Money I'd earned, money I'd saved, money that had been disappearing into family emergencies that never seemed to include me. I'd contacted a business broker about selling my shares in my parents' catering company. 30% is a significant stake, he'd said thoughtfully. You could get a good price if you're quiet about it. I'd been very quiet. Within 10 days, I'd found a buyer, a restaurant group looking to expand. They'd offered me $50,000. I'd accepted immediately. Then the Chicago offer letter arrived in my email. Lead designer. Salary, $90,000 a year. Double what I was making now. My hands had trembled as I'd clicked accept. The recruiter had called me that afternoon, thrilled. "Can you start in 6 weeks?" she'd asked. "Absolutely," I'd said, smiling for the first time in months. My parents had invited me to dinner 3 weeks after the wedding. "We need to talk things over," my mother had said on the phone. Her voice was sugary sweet, the tone she used when she wanted something. I'd driven to their house with my envelope in my purse. The dining room table was set beautifully good china, wine glasses, fresh flowers. Tessa was there too, glowing in her newlywed happiness. Dinner started with them praising Tessa endlessly. The wedding had been magical. The honeymoon in Cancun was perfect. Her new apartment was stunning. They'd barely looked at me. "How's your back?" my father had asked finally, passing the potatoes. Fine, I'd said simply. The surgery went well. He'd nodded and immediately turned back to Tessa. Tell us more about the resort. I'd eaten slowly, feeling completely detached. Like I was watching this dinner from somewhere far away. When dessert arrived, Tessa's favorite chocolate cake, I'd reached into my purse and slid a cream-colored envelope across the table. It landed next to my father's plate. What's this? He'd asked, frowning. I'd watched my mother pick up the envelope with careful fingers. She'd pulled out the papers inside, and her face had gone completely white. Lauren, what? My resignation, I'd said calmly. From the family business. I'm selling my shares and leaving. My father's fork had frozen halfway to his mouth. Tessa had stopped mid-sentence, staring at me. You can't just leave us stranded, my mother had gasped, her voice rising. We depend on your investment. Your management skills. I was stranded in that hospital bed, I'd interrupted quietly. You managed fine then. The table had gone silent. My father's face had turned red, his jaw clenching. Lauren, you're being selfish, he'd growled. We're a family. We help each other. I'd smiled then, a cold smile that felt strange on my face. You helped Tessa. You helped yourselves. I helped everyone. Now I'm helping myself. My father had slammed his hand on the table, making the wine glasses rattle. You'll regret this, he'd said darkly. I'd stood up slowly, my back twinging slightly. I already did, I'd said. I regretted every year I put you first. Then I'd walked out. Moving to Chicago felt like breathing for the first time in years. My new apartment was small but bright, with huge windows overlooking the city. I'd unpacked my boxes slowly, setting up my space exactly how I wanted it. No family photos on the walls. No reminders of who I used to be. Just clean lines, open space, and possibility. My new job started on a Monday. The office was modern and bustling, filled with creative people who actually noticed when I contributed ideas. My boss, Helen, was sharp and kind. We're lucky to have you, she'd said after my first week. Your portfolio is incredible. I'd smiled, feeling pride bloom in my chest. Pride. When was the last time I'd felt that? At home. My phone had been eerily quiet. No calls from my parents. No texts from Tessa. Then, 3 weeks after I'd moved, a voicemail appeared. Tessa's voice, tight and angry, you left at the worst time possible. Thanks for nothing, Lauren. I deleted it without listening to the rest. The worst time possible. Like my surgery hadn't been. I'd been in Chicago for a month when I'd gotten a message from Kyle, a former coworker. From home. Did you hear about Tessa's husband? He'd written. His company is being investigated for fraud. It's all over the local news. I'd nearly dropped my coffee. I'd searched online immediately and found the articles. Tessa's new husband, Preston, worked at a financial investment firm that was under federal investigation for mishandling client funds. The scandal was spreading fast. I'd sat back in my chair, processing. My parents had been so proud of Preston, his good job, his nice car, his family's reputation. They'd bragged about him at the wedding. And now this. I'd sipped my coffee slowly, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction. Not sympathy. Just a strange emptiness. 2 days later, my phone had rung. Tessa. I'd stared at her name on the screen for 3 rings before answering. Please don't tell Mom and Dad, she'd sobbed immediately. Preston says the investigation will blow over, but if they find out now, she'd kept crying, begging, pleading. I'd listened silently. Finally, I'd said, I'm not telling them anything, Tessa. I don't talk to them anymore. Over the next few weeks, I'd watched from a distance as my parents' perfect family image began to crack. Their social media posts slowed down. The cheerful updates stopped. Through mutual friends, I'd heard whispers the catering business was struggling without my management and investment. They'd missed payments to vendors. Reviews were dropping. My mother had always prided herself on their reputation in town, but now people were talking. Not loudly. Just quietly, the way small towns do. Meanwhile, Preston's scandal grew worse. His face appeared on the news. Federal agents had raided his office. Tessa had stopped posting entirely, her Instagram frozen on honeymoon pictures that now seemed like ancient history. I'd felt no urge to gloat or spread gossip. I simply didn't cover for them anymore. Didn't make excuses. Didn't clean up messes. For the first time, they were facing consequences without me as their safety net. At work, Helen had called me into her office. "We want to offer you the lead designer position permanently," she'd said, sliding a contract across her desk. 20% raise, full benefits, and your own team. I'd read the offer twice, making sure it was real. Then I'd smiled. I'll take it. 3 months into my new life, my mother had called. I'd almost ignored it, but curiosity 1. "Lauren, your father's health is getting worse," she'd said, her voice shaking. "His blood pressure is through the roof. The stress from the business. From everything, we need help." I'd waited, letting the silence stretch. "We were thinking you could come home for a few weeks," she'd continued. "Help us get things sorted. You were always so good at managing everything." My jaw had clenched. "I offered help before," I'd said calmly. "You chose differently." "That was different," my mother had protested. "This is serious. This is family." "My surgery was serious," I'd replied quietly. "That was family too." My mother's voice had turned sharp. "Don't talk to me like I'm a stranger, Lauren." I'd felt something cold and final settle in my chest. "That's what I am to you, Mom," I'd said. "I'm the stranger you call when you need something. But I'm done being used." I'd ended the call. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. That night, I'd slept better than I had in years. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. A local business magazine in Chicago had published their Rising Stars in Design feature. My face was on page 12, alongside an article about the major campaign I'd led for a national client. The headline read, "Lauren Keene, the creative mind behind this year's most innovative design." The article mentioned my background, my move to Chicago, and my rapid rise at the firm. Within days, people from my hometown had seen it. My parents' friends. My old neighbors. People who'd watched me grow up being overshadowed by Tessa's shine. The comments on the magazine's website were telling. "Isn't this the Keene girl whose family barely mentioned her? I always wondered why she was working 2 jobs while her sister did nothing. Good for her for getting out of that situation." My phone had rung. My father's number. I'd answered out of morbid curiosity. His voice was shaking. "We saw the article, Lauren. We're so proud of you." I'd ended the call mid-sentence. Proud. Now they were proud. When I was succeeding far away from them, when I couldn't be used anymore. I'd blocked their numbers after that. 4 months after I'd left, Tessa's marriage had completely collapsed. Preston's company had been shut down by federal regulators. He'd lost his job, his reputation, and was facing possible criminal charges. The news had spread through my hometown like wildfire. I'd heard through Kyle that Tessa had moved back in with my parents, her fairy tale life crumbling around her. My parents had been desperate, calling old contacts. Trying to fix things, trying to protect their perfect girl from reality. But some things couldn't be fixed. My mother had sent me an email with the subject line, "Please." I'd opened it reluctantly. "We need you, Lauren. The business is failing. Tessa is devastated. Your father's health is declining. You were always the strong one. Please come home and help us fix this." I'd read it 3 times, feeling nothing. No guilt. No obligation. Just a strange sense of distance. I'd typed a reply slowly, "You fixed me into silence for years. I'm done fixing for you. Send." The weight I'd been carrying my entire life lifted a little more. I deleted the email thread and went back to work. I had a presentation to prepare. I'd been in Chicago for 5 months when my apartment buzzer rang unexpectedly on a Saturday morning. The intercom crackled. "Lauren? It's Tessa." My heart had skipped. I'd considered not answering, but something made me press the button. "Come up." When I opened the door, Tessa had looked completely different. Her hair was unwashed, pulled into a messy bun. No makeup. Old jeans and a wrinkled sweater. Her eyes were red from crying. We'd sat on my couch in silence for a long minute. Finally, she'd spoken. "I knew what they did to you," she'd whispered, staring at her hands. "I knew about the surgery. I knew they rescheduled it for my wedding day. I didn't stop it." I'd stayed quiet, letting her continue. "I knew you were in the hospital alone," she'd said, tears streaming down her face. "I saw the photos from my reception, and I thought about you lying there, and I did nothing. I chose my perfect day over you." She'd looked up at me. "I'm so sorry, Lauren. I was selfish and spoiled, and I let them treat you like garbage because it benefited me." I'd listened to Tessa's confession without interrupting. Part of me had wanted to yell, too. Make her feel the pain I'd felt. But mostly, I'd just felt tired. "You can't undo it," I'd said finally. "But you can face it. Face who you were. Who they made you. Who you let yourself become." Tessa had nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'm trying. I left them. I got my own apartment. I'm working now at a coffee shop. It's not glamorous, but it's mine." I'd looked at her, really looked, and saw something different. Humility. Regret. Growth. "That's a start," I'd said quietly. She'd stayed for an hour. We talked carefully, honestly, without the pretense that had always existed between us. When she'd left, she'd hugged me at the door. "I don't expect forgiveness," she'd said. "But I wanted you to know the truth." I'd watched her walk away, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe, eventually, understanding. Meanwhile, back home, my parents' world continued to crumble. The catering business had officially closed. They'd sold it for almost nothing. Their house had a "for sale" sign in the yard. Word had spread through our hometown faster than my parents could control it. The Keens, who'd always seemed so perfect, so put together, were falling apart publicly. Their business gone. Their savings depleted from trying to save Preston's legal situation. Tessa divorced and starting over. Their golden child daughter working minimum wage while their invisible daughter thrived 800 miles away. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. My mother had sent another email. The subject line was simple: "We were wrong." I'd opened it reluctantly, my cursor hovering over the delete button. "Lauren, we never realized how much you did for us. How much you sacrificed. How much we took you for granted. We were wrong. We were terrible parents to you. We can't take back what we did, but we want you to know we're sorry. We're so sorry." I'd read it twice. My therapist, whom I'd started seeing in Chicago, had asked me an important question during our session that week. "What do you want from them, Lauren?" I'd thought about it for a long time. "Nothing," I'd finally said. "That's the point. I don't need their apology to be okay." 6 months after I'd left, the final pieces fell into place. My parents had lost the family business completely. The buyer who'd purchased it had turned it into something new, erasing the Keen name entirely. Their house had sold, and they'd moved into a small rental apartment on the other side of town. Tessa had filed for divorce officially. The papers were public record. Preston's legal troubles had made the regional news, fraud charges, restitution payments, possible jail time. The family that had looked so perfect in those wedding photos had completely dissolved. I'd learned all this through Kyle, who'd kept me updated despite my insistence that I didn't care. But I did follow the news with a strange detachment. I felt no joy in their downfall. No satisfaction in their suffering. Just peace. A quiet, steady peace that came from knowing I'd chosen myself. One afternoon, a handwritten letter had arrived at my office. My mother's handwriting on the envelope. Inside, just 3 sentences: "We're sorry. We were wrong. We hope someday you can forgive us." I'd held that letter for a long time, feeling its weight. Then I'd filed it away, unopened and unanswered. I'd taken a walk through Millennium Park on a perfect autumn afternoon. The sun was warm on my shoulders, the Chicago skyline gleaming in the distance. My back ached. Faintly, it always would, the doctors had said, but I stood tall anyway. I'd found a quiet spot by the lake and sat on a bench, watching the water ripple in the breeze. My therapist's voice echoed in my mind from our last session. "Forgiveness isn't for them, Lauren. It's for you. It's about releasing the weight you've been carrying." I'd pulled out my mother's letter, the one I'd been carrying in my bag for weeks. The paper was soft from being handled, folded and refolded. I'd stared at it for a long moment, feeling the years of pain, of invisibility, of being second best. Then I'd walked to the edge of the lake. Without opening it, without reading whatever apology was inside, I'd let the letter go. It had floated on the water for a moment before sinking slowly beneath the surface. I'd watched it disappear, feeling lighter. The letter didn't matter. Their sorry didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd survived. I'd chosen myself when no one else would. 9 months after leaving, my firm had hosted a major design showcase. Press cameras flashed. Industry leaders circulated with champagne glasses. My work, my vision, was displayed on huge screens throughout the gallery. Helen had introduced me to a reporter from a major design publication. "Lauren Keen is the brilliant mind behind our most successful campaign this year," she'd said proudly. The reporter had asked questions, taken notes, snapped photos. At one point, a coworker named Marcus had approached me with a smile. "Your family must be so proud of you," he'd said casually. I'd paused, considering my answer. Then I'd smiled softly. "They would be," I'd said quietly, "if they knew me." Later, as I'd left the gallery, my reflection had caught in the glass doors. I'd stopped and really looked at myself. Strong shoulders. Clear eyes. A confident posture. Despite the surgical scar I'd always carry. I looked powerful. Free. Whole. My voiceover whispered in my mind, settling the story forever: they chose her wedding over my surgery. So I chose myself, and that was the sweetest revenge of all. I'd walked into the Chicago night, alone but never lonely, leaving the past where it belonged, behind me.